What was a man to do if he suspected that his wife had been unfaithful to him but had no proof? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Numbers on Walking Through the Bible.
Glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, turn to Numbers chapter 5. We're going to be reading from verses 11 to 15. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Numbers chapter 5, beginning at verse 11. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, If any man's wife goes astray and behaves unfaithfully towards him, and a man lies with her carnally, and it is hidden from the eyes of her husband, and it is concealed that she has defiled herself, and there was no witness against her, nor was she caught, if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife, who has defiled herself, or if the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, and he becomes jealous of his wife, although she has not defiled herself, then the man shall bring his wife to the priest. He shall bring the offering required for her, 1/10 of an ephah of barley meal. He shall pour no oil on it, and put no frankincense on it, because it is a grain offering of jealousy, an offering for remembering, for bringing iniquity to remembrance. So far in chapter 5, we have had a review and an expansion of some of the laws we discussed in Leviticus. In chapters 13 and 14 of Leviticus, we had laws concerning leprosy. We learned that anyone with leprosy was to live outside the camp, for they were unclean until they were cleansed of their leprosy. We learned here in Numbers 5 that anyone with a discharge, as was discussed in Leviticus 15, as well as anyone who had defiled themselves by touching a dead body, was also to be outside the camp until they were cleansed. This was because God is a holy God, and would thus not be among those who were defiled under the law. We also discussed the expansion of the trespass offering, which dealt with situations where restitution could not be made to the person itself because the person had died or because they could not be found. In those cases, restitution was to be paid to a relative of the person, but if the person had no relatives, restitution would be made to the Lord, and the amount given would be for use by the priest. Coming down to verse 11 of Numbers 5, we get to the recording of a strange ritual that could be practiced in Israel when a husband suspected that his wife had been unfaithful to him, but he had no proof. This is the only time in Scripture that we read of it, and some Jewish sources that I have consulted report that it had been done away with by the time of Jesus, if not before. This law was not commanded to be done, so that the Jews abandoned it did not mean that they broke God's law, but since they abandoned it, men shouldn't have treated their wives improperly by merely suspecting them of infidelity without proof, for the Lord had given them a method of determining the woman's guilt or innocence. The process for determining the guilt or innocence of his wife was to bring her before the priest. He would not bring her to the elders of the city for stoning. He would not simply put her away by divorce. He would bring her to God's representative among the people, the priest, and it would be God who would bring the matter to light. Remember that Hebrews 1 verse 1 says that God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in times past to the fathers by the prophets. A prophet is merely someone who had a direct message from God. So in the instance of this ritual, the priest would be the prophet. And this ritual is one of the ways that God spoke to the prophet. Along with his wife, her husband was to bring 1/10 of an offering of barley meal. This would have been similar to the grain offering that we discussed in Leviticus chapter 2. What were the differences? Let's first refresh our memory of the grain offering by reading Leviticus 2 verses 1 to 3. When anyone offers a grain offering to the Lord, his offering shall be of fine flour, and he shall pour oil on it and put frankincense on it. He shall bring it to Aaron's sons, the priests, one of whom shall take it from his handful of fine flour and oil with all the frankincense. And the priest shall burn it as a memorial on the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet aroma to the Lord. The rest of the grain offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is most holy of the offerings to the Lord made by fire. The offering found in Numbers 5, which is called the grain offering of jealousy, would not be of fine wheat flour, but of barley meal. No oil or frankincense would be poured on it either, for it is not an offering of first fruits or an offering of thanksgiving. It is an offering of remembering for bringing iniquity to remembrance. Therefore, since the finding out of sin was involved, this sacrifice would be different than the regular grain offering, and so as not to be confused with this offering, different materials would be used. We'll continue with this ritual, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Numbers chapter 5, verses 16 to 22, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.